And then, of course, there are areas in terms, say, of the independent directors. That's always an issue for us, because most companies comply with the requirement to have 1/3 independent directors on their board. But to what degree these directors are actually independent of the mind, in many cases is also questionable. And we want independent directors to exercise their role and discharge their responsibilities to provide constructive challenge and inquiry, to the extent possible. And sometimes there are cases where directors are beholden to the majority shareholders, for example, and therefore do not raise the kind of challenge and inquiry that is expected of them. Sometimes, by their nature, they don't like conflicts, and therefore they defer to the wishes of the rest of the board. So these are all areas where we feel a lot of improvement, can be made. It's quite interesting that a recent survey that was carried out by Bursa to ascertain the extent to which independent directors understand their duties and are carrying out their role in the manner that is required of them. And 50% of directors say that they don't understand what their role is.
50.
Yes. So, of course, then, this begs the question of what kind of competence, is required of directors before they can come on to the board of companies. And that's why we also emphasize, on directors' education. Of course, directors have got to go through this mandatory accreditation program when they first join the board. But, they also need, and this is quite obvious, that they also need continuing professional education. And I would like companies to take on this continuing professional education on board very seriously. In the past, we used to have mandatory continuing professional education, but there was a lot of objections to that. And therefore, Bursa changed their rules to say that, okay, you do it yourself, and please disclose in your annual reports what you have done. But I think it's important that directors take continuing professional education very seriously so that they are able to discharge their role and responsibilities effectively. When they are appointed, they have specific roles to play. These roles are quite clearly prescribed by the Code of Corporate Governance, and that's why it is very important for them to understand what their role is. Naturally, for spending time, to be on these boards, they need to be acknowledged, and they need to be compensated, and that is an accepted practice. But at the same time, they must be aware what they are there for. So the fact that they are being compensated for spending the time, it is compensation from the companies, acknowledgement from the companies. But the company is not just made up of majority shareholders, it's made up of all shareholders. In order for directors to do their job well, I think they must understand the nature of the business. They must have understanding some understanding of finance. They must be able to read the financial statements, and they must be vigilant. They must ask questions. They must challenge. So that is the role of independent directors on the board. Certainly, we have seen shortcomings in terms of knowledge and capacity on the part of directors. And that's why, I keep emphasizing the need for directors to keep themselves abreast in terms of development, to be more vigilant, to exercise a greater degree of diligence in terms of the papers that are presented to them for decisions, and to require information from the companies. They have the right to ask information, and therefore they should do so. This is to enable them to make decisions in an informed manner. So on our part, of course, we enforce the laws very strictly. We have a very high degree of supervision, monitoring, and surveillance that we carry out in the market. But of course, as you know, the jurisdiction of the SC is fairly limited. And there are other regulators who will also have to come in and enforce the laws that they have jurisdiction over when a certain misconduct is being committed by the public listed companies. Of course, I forgot to mention the investors themselves just now. The investors themselves must be knowledgeable and must make considered decisions when they're making choices in terms of their investments.